We'll kick it off with a quick introduction to me, why I'm here, and why we're talking about enterprise forecasting and board reporting. Before getting into the process itself, and we'll aim to leave time at the end for any questions that you may have, and we can dig into those too. So, to kick things off, a brief introduction to me. So, my name's Dan. I'm co-founder and CEO of Cluster, an enterprise B2B forecasting solution. I've got a degree in theoretical physics, which is very heavy on the computational modeling side of things. I worked at Europe's first ever SaaS company in their database team, essentially. And it was there that I learned about large scale enterprise databases, data storage and data processing before moving into the reinsurance market, training to be an actuary. And I would do computational modeling and forecasting for extreme events. So in that, the Venn diagram of those skill sets was across computational modeling, enterprise databases, finance, forecasting, and data science, machine learning, and AI, which is what got me into co-founding Cluster. My co-founder Rory, who at the time we started it, was a very successful sales leader, and brought to my attention that the skill set and the technologies that are available in other sectors around the world aren't necessarily available in B2B sales-led organizations, which is why we started Cluster. Before starting Cluster, my forecasting claim to fame is that I was on a small team of 2 or 3 people building the forecast for one of the largest natural catastrophes, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. In terms of roll-up forecasting, we submitted our forecast and it rolled up through quite a few rungs of the ladder and ended up being with President Barack Obama, who was talking about our forecast live on TV about 14 years ago, I believe. So that's me, that's my background, and why I'm into forecasting and why I started Cluster. And so with that, let's kick off into the process. My apologies. And the background to Cluster. So Cluster is an enterprise forecasting solution for B2B companies. We serve companies backed by very well-known private equity funds around the world, Bain, Vista, Morgan Stanley, and many more, as well as public companies listed on stock exchanges on both sides of the Atlantic. We forecasted around $30 trillion of revenue last year and are on track to be doubling that in 2026. So it's a very exciting time to be in the enterprise B2B world. So now to get into the 5-step forecasting framework, I will run through the 5 steps of these. I have got a much more detailed book essentially covering this, which I can send out to the attendees afterwards. This is very much a summary and an explanation of what to do, but we've got checklists and other very useful assets essentially that you can use. So I'll run through each of these steps. If you have any questions or queries to do with your specific market, your specific use case, please do raise your hand. We specialize in working with B2B companies with all sorts of challenges, be it multiple systems, be it consumption-based pricing, traditional B2B sales, PLG, enterprise, and all the way through every type of transaction. So would very much welcome those questions. Now, the first of the 5 steps of this forecasting framework is preparation. So arguably the most important step, and I would say that it's the most overlooked and frequently skipped step, even though it sounds to be the most obvious. So the first step of the preparation stage is essentially goal alignment. And this is the easiest and the most obvious part to do and the most frequently overlooked part. And it is increasingly overlooked as the companies that are deploying processes get larger and larger, and the teams that are deploying these reporting and forecasting and AI systems may get more and more further removed from the board. So goal alignment is simply put, what does your board believe the #1 goal is for the next 12 to 36 months? It could be hitting a certain revenue number, it could be a revenue growth percentage, it could be expanding your margin or expanding into another territory or a product line or whatever it might be. But whatever the key goal is for your CEO and for the board, you should have that in mind at this step and at every step of the process, because forecasting solutions can get very complex, and having the goal in mind will help you eradicate any steps that are somewhat superfluous, and focusing purely on those that are adding the largest amount of disproportionate value to get a very valuable system designed, built, and shipped as fast as possible. So Once you've gone internally and you've verified what the goal is, and you've made sure that everyone involved in the project will be aligned on what that goal is, the next step is to go through to the process review. So this is all about understanding the forecasting status quo, the process within your organization as it is today. So who are the key stakeholders of forecasting? Who is the ultimate owner of the forecast? Who runs the roll-up forecasting process through the sales organization up to the board, if there is one? In what ways do in-period forecasts, for example, this month or this quarter, differ from future period forecasts, for example, next month, next quarter, future quarters? And in what ways do these differ to forecasts beyond that? For example, 3 quarters out, 6 quarters out, and multiple years out. So in practice, the sales organization typically owns the current month or quarter and maybe next month or next quarter. Then at some point, there's a bit of a gray area between sales and finance, at which point it's handed over. And typically the assumptions for the future ones are pretty broad brush, and there's a huge amount of value to be gained by digging into the detail in that gray area. And lastly, what's the cadence of key revenue-facing meetings at your organization as it is today? For example, forecast meetings, deal reviews, pipeline reviews, one-to-one meetings, operations and strategy meetings, and board meetings. So understanding what that process is, understanding which parts are required and which parts aren't. And of course, once you know the frequency of the board meetings, you can work backwards with the cadence of the forecasting process from that to make sure that the output of your regular forecasting cadence is optimized in terms of the timeline, so that the board are ready before each meeting. The third part is the use case review. So this is understanding the exact areas of the business that use the forecasting output, whether they use it today or not, but also reviewing whether they should or shouldn't. And oftentimes that doesn't perfectly marry up as at today. So for example, is forecasting used for annual budgeting and planning, quarterly rebudgeting and replanning and rolling plans, sales team management and performance management, capacity planning, defining the strategy, where to invest, where to pull investment, what products and services to focus on and which to pull out of. Board reporting, obviously. Whoever the ultimate owner of the forecast is, whether it's a more CRO-focused commercial forecast or whether it's the CFO, CEO, etc. And to what extent is it being used and incorporated into what-if modeling, stress testing, and extreme scenarios. And secondly, the use case in terms of the personas who are doing it. To what extent are the individual contributors involved, the account execs and the account managers. Many times, of course, they are involved, but sometimes it starts at the sales manager of a team and then rolls up from that point. So the sales managers, the sales leaders, VP sales, CRO, the marketing teams, sales operations and revenue operations. This is very much a different definition per company. Sometimes they're very, very commercially focused. Sometimes they're very close to the finance and operations team. Sometimes they cover all bases, and sometimes they cover far fewer. So really defining what they do cover and what they don't is very important. Then on to FP&A, the CRO, CFO, and CEO. So once you've gone through that and created a very specific list of who is doing what and why, you can then essentially stack rank it and say, right, what are the most important use cases? Obviously, essentially rolling up to the board at the end of the day, and to roll into the CFO. But different companies at different stages of growth beyond that have different use cases. So ranking those accordingly is very important. And then step 4, the pain review. Understand the pain, if any, that the business experiences as a result of challenges related to forecasting. So I always say that particularly in the commercial team, commercial team members, salespeople, sales leadership, sales managers should spend as much time as possible selling and delivering results, and as little time as possible forecasting. So if you can, the longer your sales cycle, the more infrequent your forecast should be, kind of balanced at the saddle point of still optimizing for the best forecast possible. But just to dig into this pain, where in the organization are the biggest areas of pain, and then you'll know what areas of the forecasting to deliver first. So it's the lack of confidence in the sales bookings and the revenue forecast. Have you got problems in revenue recognition, ARR calculations if you're running a recurring revenue business? Are you missing quota by material amounts? Is there a huge volatility in swings or seasonality? Is that where the problem is? Have you got an inability to commit to future spend, or are you committing and then pulling back over and over again, which is really stalling the business? Or operationally, is it more of a workflow challenge? Are you spending a huge amount of time and effort pulling in the commercial team to be running the forecast process, which may in turn be causing challenges commercially? And again, over to the side of the people, who exactly is feeling the pain? Is it the sales professionals and the sales managers, or is it more at the leadership side of things, or the finance and the CFO? Who's feeling the most pain and why? And what is the biggest gap that you can fill as quickly as possible? So once you've done your pain review, moving towards the end of this first preparation phase, the technology review. So understand the technology that you're using across sales and across finance, not to the board, to manage this forecasting. Now, as mentioned, there's typically one process in the commercial organization which focuses on the current pipeline and the current month or quarter, and a separate process in the finance team that focuses on future months and future quarter and future years. And at some point, they overlap. And it's really important to create a detailed review and audit of what the technology is and what the processes are. Often plenty of spreadsheets, plenty of meetings and manual work involved in that. Detailing exactly what CRMs are used, what ERP is used. Is there a data warehouse that essentially has most or all of the data you need? And digging into the roll-up forecasting process, how frequently is it? Is it too frequent? Is it not frequent enough? Who's involved? Could it be automated? Is it even necessary? And one of the biggest weaknesses in the tech stack, whether it be operationally or technically, or in terms of the cost and the ROI of that. Building out that document is very important before you make a decision. The next up, solution design. So essentially come up with a pretty quick overview of a solution, starting at the bottom with the data model. Where is your data? CRM, ERP, data warehouse, or spreadsheets? Reporting layer. What do people want to see? What's your CFO want to see? What's your CRO want to see? And then beyond that, the forecasting layer. Once you've got your reporting layer, it's typically the same metrics in reporting, but you forecast those metrics. So you're forecasting those same metrics into the future. And then you lock in the operating cadence, basically reverse engineered from the board meeting and other regular senior leadership meetings, to basically be working in lockstep with those. And then once that's architected, you can iteratively bring on leadership across the organization, and then go down to individual contributors over time. And lastly, a schedule of work. So basically building out clear milestones for immediate impact. What are you going to have delivered on day 7, day 30, day 60, day 90, etc. Have that signed off by someone who's as senior as possible, preferably CRO, CFO, or CEO, and then use that to really push this project forward. So I spent quite a bit of time on that preparation phase, but it's very important to do, and basically build a document which can be pretty comprehensive, and especially with AI, you can do it pretty quickly, and get buy-in from across the organization. Now, blockers to avoid: misalignment, overcomplicating, and competing outcomes, all of which can be avoided by creating one clear, simple document which is signed off by someone who's as senior as possible, and then conflicts of interest and misalignment and miscommunication would hopefully be eradicated too. But those are very common blockers, which are normally people problems rather than technology or process ones. So the second phase is the sales and the CRM. So when you're thinking of building up reporting to do with your revenue, it really starts at the pipeline in your sales engine, which is why this is the second phase. So there are three steps to this. So essentially, integration and configuration. So what that means is integrate with your CRM, look at where the strengths are, where the data is solid, where the data is a bit weaker, and make sure that you've got one clean and consistent taxonomy. What currencies you're reporting on? What are your sales stages? Do they map to the sales process that you want? Are you locking that in, or do you want to make any changes? What impact would that have on future and past reporting? It's very important to have reporting on a consistent basis. And if you're making changes, it's pretty important to do them all at once so that you can draw a line in the sand and build out clean, comparable data moving forward. So once you've been able to ensure that your CRM is ready to go, which, by the way, everyone thinks it isn't, but it essentially always is. There's always enough data in there to get going with a pretty powerful system. Then I'd say move on to the data hygiene review. So essentially, any CRM, particularly if you're in the sales team and you look at it, if you've got an opportunity or a deal and you've got some fields on it, you've got the amount, the close date, the sales stage, um, etc. You're seeing potentially 3 fields, 4 fields, whatever it might be, and any one of those fields might be wrong. So the close date and the amount might be optimistic. The close date is too soon, the amount's too high. The sales stage is probably objectively correct. But you might look at those 3 fields and think that it's not very believable, and in aggregate, it might cause problems. But the reality is, in the back end of the CRM, you've got essentially an audit log of every change that every sales rep has made to every deal, every contact, and every lead and every account. And typically you've got calendar integrations, etc. So you can see emails that have been sent, meetings that have been booked, scheduled, the stakeholders that are on each deal, how the amounts have moved up or down over time, how the close dates have moved up or down. So actually, once you dig into that data and do a data hygiene review, what you'll find is that even if the amount itself may not be particularly believable, if the amount has been going up, you can infer that there's growing confidence in the deal. If the amount has been going down or it just stayed the same for a very long time, there might be less confidence in the deal. And the same with the close date. If it was being pushed out continually, you can infer that the likelihood of win is low. And conversely, if it's being pulled forward and regularly reviewed, you can have much higher confidence. So it's not so much about the exact value, it's about the movement and the ebbs and flows of the data point itself, which is all within the CRM, and no matter what CRM you're using. Um, and next up is the CRM review. So once you've looked at your data hygiene and you've figured out exactly what you believe to be correct and what's really urgent to change, essentially set out a plan to make the changes. It could be to your sales stages, it could be to implement Medic or some sort of sales process, and then roll that out in as clean and simple a way as possible, and then move on. And then from that point, we'll move on to the next point. Apologies. The blockers to avoid. Data is not enough. The data is not ready, or there's waiting for another project to finish. This is what we hear at Cluster all the time, and I can promise you that for any company of any scale, turning over a minimum of tens of millions, that's never been correct. So there's always more than enough data to work with. You don't want to be over-engineering anything. You can very easily keep it simple, dig into the historic data, and create something extremely powerful in a short period of time. So I would strongly recommend anyone who's hearing this or feeling this themselves to just push on with something extremely simple and grow a system over time. So moving on to the third step, essentially you've done the review, you've done the first step of aligning around the goal and auditing both in terms of operations, your process, who needs a forecast and why, what are the biggest pain points, etc., and your CRM. The next stage is to move on to finance and reporting. So essentially, once you've got your sales up and running, you need to then figure out what the bridge is towards what the finance team needs to be reporting on, all the way from pipeline through to sales bookings, through to revenue, and then up to a board level. And then once you've done this, the most important stage, you've basically got all of your historic reporting wrapped up, and then you can move on to the most important part, which is forecasting. So there are 3 core stages here. So the first one is sales and pipeline reporting. Configure and test simple KPIs on 4 items. So deal inspection reporting at a deal level, pipeline management and reporting, of course, at a pipeline level, sales bookings and reporting at an aggregate level, and then sales performance reporting. So really looking at the trends, which then turn out to be inputs to a forecast in the next step, such as sales velocity analytics, win rates, pipeline win rates, sales cycle analytics, segmented by product, etc. Again, we can be sending out a much more detailed document on this afterwards. But once this is all wrapped up, you can then move on to the revenue recognition side of things, whereby you would be talking with your finance team and saying, how do you do revenue recognition? Is it on a frequent basis? Is it each month? Is it each quarter? What's the time lag? How complex is it? And typically, Cluster, at least, we can build a system very, very fast that basically does live revenue recognition, also enabling revenue forecasting as well as sales bookings forecasting. But if you're doing a system in-house, whether it be in spreadsheets or otherwise, there are still ways that you can create assumptions between the bookings and the revenue recognition, and be running it live, scheduled tasks each day or each week or whatever it might be, and be delivering numbers that are really accurate within a few percent for your CFO, which would be phenomenally powerful for the team. And lastly, the reporting from the financial side. So if you've got a recurring revenue business, obviously ARR would be the key metric, but if you don't, revenue. So talking to your CFO and the board and figuring out exactly what the key metrics are regarding your top line, ARR movements, expansion, contraction, upsell, etc., the churn. And if it's revenue, one-off projects, metrics around the types of goods and services and products that you're selling to, and locking down the types of reporting that you've got. So that leads us to the final phase, essentially, which is forecasting. So we've looked at the company's goals and we've built out the sales data, the sales reporting, and the financial reporting. And if you stopped here, you would have a full suite of reports that are all connected and dependent on each other, and which are essentially can be run live, or if not, every day or every week, and probably be a lot more accurate and a lot more comprehensive than what many companies have right now. But the beauty of having this incredible system is that it makes forecasting infinitely easier, and I'll tell you why. So essentially, once you've got the metric you care about historically, then almost all the time you would want to be forecasting those exact same metrics and applying the sales analytics, the conversion rates, and any other assumptions around the business to those. So you've actually done a huge amount of the hard work already, because you can apply that reporting framework to your forecasting framework. So when it comes to forecasting, you look at four different things. The first of which is the roll-up forecasting setup. So the individual contributors, the team, and the revenue lines, who are submitting a forecast, when, and what for. Do you want to do it by product line? Do you want to do it by geography or territory, or do you want to do it by something else? And what is the lowest rung of the ladder for submitting those numbers? Is it the account exec and the account manager, or would you start at the sales manager or the regional manager of a certain team to take a view and then roll it up from there? When we're deploying a roll-up forecasting solution, we'll always start from the top. So you start with the CRO, and then incrementally over the weeks and months, push it down to the sales leaders and then down to the ICs after that point. Next up will be the cadence. So the optimum cadence for roll-up forecasting, I would argue, is completely dependent on the sales cycle. So if your sales cycle is a month, you need to really be submitting it at least once a week. But if your sales cycle is 6 to 12 months, you can probably get away with once a month, and then have lots of other automated forecasting systems running in parallel. Other points around the roll-up forecasting, given that it's more of an operational workflow and a cadence rather than technology, or a technology-enabled operational cadence, figuring out what alerts you want. Do you want to be alerted when a certain person submits a forecast, or when a certain team misses a forecast or doesn't submit it? Do you want to be alerted if a certain forecast is above or below target, or if there's any other flags or alerts? You can basically bake into this cadence alerts sent straight to the CRO, the CFO, the CEO, which tell them exactly what the risks and opportunities in their business are as early as possible, which is extremely powerful. And then you move up into technical setup. How are you going to be running this workflow, etc. Next up is the forecasting model selection. So essentially building models and deciding how to blend them together over time. So if you're modeling for next quarter and the quarters after that, you would likely be using assumptions around the pipeline you create, around your marketing, demand generation, etc., and the conversion rates and sales cycle. And of course, if you're looking at the current quarter, you'd be looking at your existing pipeline, you'd be looking at the signals around that, be looking at the call transcripts, the movements through the stages, etc. So you'd have to build models which are dependent on the type of product you're selling, the sales cycle, and then relative to the fiscal reporting period that you are reporting for. Next up is the forecasting architecture. So once you've got those models, you might want to heavily weight one model. Many people heavily weight the roll-up forecasting model, and then have a lighter weighting on other automated models. But that really is something that you tweak on an ongoing basis rather than lock in before you deploy anything. So that's something to do once you've deployed a system. And next up, the forecasting review is essentially once you've deployed it, You can look every week and every month at what was the most accurate and what was the most inaccurate method or person or team and why, and then you dig into it. Then you can adjust the cadence or the model, the weightings of the models accordingly, and you've essentially got this living, breathing system that is self-improving at least every week, which would then converge towards something very powerful very quickly. Got an infographic here just as an example of how to build out forecasting architecture. I explain them as additive and complete models. So an additive model would be based on your current pipeline plus your closed one, and then you kind of add them together to create a number. And then once you've done that to create a number, you can have multiple different models and methods that are predicting for the period. And then of course you have to multiply them by a weighting, which should add up to 100%. So you'd have a few models based on your closed one, plus your current pipeline, plus an assumption around what you're going to create and close. And then that creates a number for the quarter. Then you can blend those with other numbers for the quarter based on machine learning, statistics, and other AI methods as well, which both comes up with a pretty powerful, accurate number, but also having that spread creates the strategic discussion points for the board when they're trying to point out why one number is larger or lower than another. You can talk to why, you can see the drivers of each model and discuss those. So lastly, we'll go to the execution. So I always recommend to create something extremely simple, potentially in a spreadsheet or otherwise, and deploy it early. Create it at the top level for an organization, or maybe just for one business unit, or product line, or territory, and make it extremely simple based on a weighted view of the current pipeline, whatever it might be, and deploy it early. And then iteratively expand it and bring in more and more people over time as the weeks go by. And what you'll find is after 3 months and 6 months, you'll have a very powerful system, and you have learned by iteration of what works in your organization and what doesn't. Whereas I've seen companies spend 6 months or 12 months or even 24 months design theoretically an architecture to deploy, that then they go to deploy it and it doesn't work. And then we've had to go in and deploy our own solution. So I would always recommend, if you're doing it in-house, to just start with something extremely simple and roll it out and iterate fast. And as long as you iterate fast, you will converge towards something better in the subsequent week, and so on and so forth. Last up, AI. Obviously, I haven't mentioned AI here. Now, AI is very transformational. I won't go into it right now, but I wanted to mention that the underlying principles of forecasting don't change because of AI. You can have more powerful AI models, you can have AI powering your workflow, but nonetheless, understanding what you need to do in terms of your architecture, infrastructure, and processes don't change. Please do reach out if you have any questions or need any help. We're always here to help the community. Rolling out a forecasting solution is very challenging and often lonely at times. It's normally given to 1 or 2 people. So please do reach out if you need any help. Apart from that, thank you for joining, and we'll speak soon.